Evening all. When I was a child growing up in London, my family had a close friend called George. He'd been in the British Army in the 1960s, and he left in the 70s, became a chauffeur to a lot of wealthy people. And, he used to come around a lot, stay with us for a little bit, have meals and such. Now, when he was in the army, he was stationed primarily on the in West Germany, on the West German East German border. He was part of the unit that observed close at hand the movements of both Soviet and East German forces, and he got to see a lot of life behind the Iron Curtain through his duties. So he wasn't just a chauffeur when he left the army; he had a sideline, and that was going into the Iron Curtain and trying to bring people out into the West. He helped defectors, and not the sort of big name defectors like various people connected to the Politburo or spies or anything like that. He's just trying to get ordinary people who were living behind the Iron Curtain across by various routes, land routes and a couple of sea routes as well, if you can imagine. So what happened was that he was quite frank about what he told us with us, because in the event of anything happening to him, we were a kind of we were a point of contact for his family as well. That he wanted to let us know that something could go wrong. Anyway, what happens is that he told us one year that he was going to go in because he had a German girlfriend, an East German girlfriend. He wanted to get her out next. So what happened then was that he left and told us, this is a tricky one, but if anything should happen, and you're contacted by the Foreign Office, you'll know why. Anyway, we didn't see him for years. I can't remember how long, but it was about 5 years. We didn't see him. And then one day, there was a knock on our front door, and I opened it, and there was this guy there, and he said, "Hi, Nick. Is your mum home?" It's me, George. I didn't recognise it. It's the guy I last saw. It was kind of a stout guy, with brown hair, glasses, in good health. This guy standing in front of me was stick thin, grey hair, just lines across his face. George was at that stage in his mid to late 40s, but this guy in front of me looked about 70. It just looked absolutely wrecked. So I was very nervous, and I said, "Mum, there's a guy claiming to be George at the front door." And she came out. She didn't recognise him for a few seconds then, but recognised him from his voice. And we invited him in. What the hell was going on? What happened? Well, that last trip to East Germany went badly. He messed up with his German girlfriend who was pregnant with his child, and they had a route that, because she was part of the network as well, she'd been helping people. That's how they met in the first place, and it was now her turn to get out because the Stasi were alerted to her activities. So they're trying to get out. Part of the one area where you could get people out from behind the Iron Curtain was through Bulgaria, the Black Sea route. And that's what they tried, but they were arrested. She was sent to a Russian jail, so within the Russian borders. He was sent to a Bulgarian jail. Their child was born in captivity and then taken away by the state. They didn't see it after that. So they were separated. He was in a Bulgarian prison where he was tortured, and they tried to break him because he had all the contacts of his network, and he'd been trained by the British Army back when he was with the observation team to withstand torture, well, to an extent. But George wouldn't go into too much details, except he went into some detail about life in a Bulgarian prison, which is, if you've seen the film Midnight Express, not a million miles away from that. And he was telling us this before the film Midnight Express had even come out. So it was shocking to hear. I mean, I didn't hear all of it because I was quite young at the time. So I didn't hear the full extent, but I discovered enough. Anyway, he was able to get out, not because he'd served a term of sentence. You know, he went through proper due process, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison and then let out. He bought his way out. You could do that in the Soviet Union. If you raised enough money, you could buy your way out. And that's what happened. He sold everything he had. Hence, when he came back to Britain, he wanted to live with us for a few days while he could contact his wider family. And they raised some money, and some of the wealthy people that he had worked with who knew that he was serious about getting people out from behind the Iron Curtain, they chipped in as well. So they were able to buy him out after a few years. But then the process had to be to get his girlfriend out and then try and get the child. So a few months later, the other thing was that he did say, "Look, I don't want to bring you guys into it because now I'm known. I'm marked by both the KGB and special branch. We had a couple of special branch officers visit us and just want to know, where's George going? What are his movements? Did he say what he was going to do?" And so George said, "Look, after a few days, he said, look, the plan is I'm going to go back and I'm going to get her and the child. But this is where we part because I don't want you now on the radar." And, after a visit from Special Branch, my mum just said, we have to wish George all the best. And one day he might get in touch with us. And I never heard from him again, unfortunately. So I don't know what happened in the end. And we'd moved to Australia about a year later. So that broke a lot of contacts with people that we knew back in Britain. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because of my fears about where we're all heading with the Marxist activists that are gradually increasing their control over both the United Kingdom and the United States of America, and probably most of the Western world at this time. Now, in subsequent years, I've met other people who lived and suffered behind the Iron Curtain. I know Romanians, I know people from former East Germany, I know Hungarians, and they all have pretty horrific tales to tell about life behind the Iron Curtain. The East German chap I knew, he told us that they couldn't even have a book discussion group, to discuss things like Ernest Hemingway or the Bible without the Stasi knowing and clamping down on it. It got to that level. And I see on social media, and I see the activists, and I see people on television sort of making excuses for these Marxist activists. And I see the Premier League players bending the knee, and I see all these corporations donating money to an openly Marxist cause like Black Lives Matter. And when I refer to Black Lives Matter, I do mean the organisation. I don't mean the concept. And as a student of history and as somebody who studied the Cold War and tangentially experienced the Cold War, both what it meant to be living in the 70s and 80s, when the last 2 decades of the Cold War, and also having met lots of people who lived through those times and can relate the hardships that they suffered. And I look at the idiots that surround us now wanting this. Well, history tells us a very bleak story about what happens when these people take control. And we can see it unfolding in front of us now. Not only is our entire history and culture being rewritten, everything we've known, that we learn openly in school, that we were allowed to study and then question and then analyze, is being erased. And we're told we have to look at our own history through one particular prism. You got two. You got the primary school way of looking at it, was what was it like for a Tudor washerwoman, or this is how evil and oppressive we've been to the world. It's the only 2 prisms you're allowed to look at history through now. And so that's being done. That's what they did in communist countries. And when I see something on Twitter like today, some loudmouth activist with a few hundred followers, I don't know, but he certainly was big enough to get retweeted. But he was denouncing David Baddiel and Frank Skinner because back in the 1990s, when they were doing Fantasy Football League, David Baddiel had blacked up as the footballer Jason Lee. Part of the costume was to have half a pineapple on the head to simulate Jason Lee's kind of pineapple-shaped hairstyle that he had at the time. And now Baddiel for that has to pay penance, according to these online activists, these people who seem to wield a disproportionate amount of influence and say that nobodies who force celebrities to come to them and say, I'm sorry. See, it doesn't matter what Baddiel's done in his career up till now. He probably thinks he's a good little left of centre, right on kind of guy, but it doesn't matter anymore. He can play his I'm a Jew, this is anti Semitic card. It won't wash anymore. It won't wash. He's tainted because of something he did 20 years ago. 20 years ago. So there's no statute of limitations with this stuff. If you said or did anything, no matter how long ago it is, that's it. Your card is marked. And these activists are actively trawling through your history on social media or your body of work to find out where you went wrong. It's an inquisition. It has all the trappings of religious fervour. And if we look at various countries around the world, we look at history, we can see where this is all going to end. The Inquisition, the French Revolution, the Communist revolutions, the Iranian Revolution, what happened in South Africa and Zimbabwe. We can see where anger turns to revenge. And this is not justice. It's not social justice. This is social revenge. This is what it's always been about. You can see in the behaviour. And we might do this in this revolution that we're having in the UK in a bit more of a sophisticated way. We won't necessarily go around like they did in Cambodia and get the phone book. Anybody with a telephone gets shot and killed because to have a telephone is to be bourgeois. Likewise, they killed everybody who wore glasses because to have glasses meant that you could read. And if you could read, you were bourgeois middle class and had to die. No, we'll do it differently. We'll have a social credit system where you'll be denied work, places to study, or you'll be even denied a bank account. You'll be denied the facilities to live. Maybe you can throw yourself on the mercy of some self-appointed court. It won't be a court in a legal sense. It'll be a social court. You can throw yourself on the mercy and maybe they will grant you clemency. But as I've seen with these activists and heard their words, they don't care if they cut you off from everything and you die in the streets. You die of starvation or exposure in the streets. That doesn't matter. It's one less of you because they don't view you as human. I noticed this with the uproar about Fantasy Football League mocking Jason Lee, David Baddiel and Frank Skinner mocking Jason Lee. That was over 20 years ago, possibly even 25 years ago. But what they did was started referring to Frank Skinner by his birth name. I didn't know he had a birth name Collins, but they started calling him Collins. See, denying him the name of his choice. Oh yeah, you have to use their pronouns unless they don't like you, right? Then you don't get to choose how you define yourself. We saw this with Tommy Robertson, real name Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and pointedly, and I noticed this when it happened, was the Canadian academic Ronaldo Walcott refused to call Jordan Peterson and Lindsay Shepherd by their names. He always called them L. Shepherd, J. Peterson, not even giving Peterson the title doctor, which he's earned. Because to do those things would be to humanize him. You can't do that. That's not how their mind works. And we see things like the killing fields, like in Zimbabwe and South Africa. Angry mobs is taking entire properties and shooting the owners. And I think we're on the threshold of that. But we'll do it in a sophisticated way. As I said, you'll be deleted in a highly modern, sophisticated way with a social credit score. And corporations won't want to deal with you because you're either far right or far right adjacent. Your words are unacceptable in this new regime. And who's leading these regimes, and who are they accountable for? And how do you question them and challenge them? And how do you vote against them? Well, that's it. They've bypassed democracy. How many billions of dollars now has Black Lives Matter raised? What are they going to do with that money? It's certainly not going to go to any kind of street level projects to help people into work. It is probably going to be used to advance political candidates, especially in America, probably also in this country as well. So I am terrified of what's going to happen because I've seen the history, and as I said, I've met people and know them well. I know these aren't just passing acquaintances. These are people I spent a lot of time in their company with, and I know what horrors lie there. And we're having that erased. Oh, it wasn't so bad under Stalin, or it wasn't. It's not so bad under communism. The Holodomor didn't exist. The gulags weren't as bad. Oh, Solzhenitsyn only wrote fiction. It's not true. Well, I'm sorry, but I've met too many people, and it is true. It's true. I've met too many people from behind the Iron Curtain who can attest to how true this was and the horrors were. And these left wingers are lying. They're lying about it. And I'm worried about where it's all going to end and how it's going to manifest it. That's why I'm terrified. And also, that's why I'm so disappointed in the defeatist right. People like Peter Hitchens, Ed West. I can always count on my cats to undermine the gravitas of this. Always remember, I didn't buy the cats. I didn't want the cats. They were given to me. They're fun most of the times, but they're very noisy at night. Anyway, what I was saying is to get the gravitas back is that I'm fed up with the defeatist right like Hitchens, West, and Daniel Bostock, who gave Hitchens a thumb up. I was having a to and fro with Hitchens recently, where he recommended that rather than try and seek solutions to this crisis that we find ourselves in, I should just open a bottle of Rioja and take a walk in the woods. Okay. Rioja's horrible, nasty plonk anyway, but it's just sticking your head in the sand. Now, I'm disappointed with Hitchens because he has experienced firsthand the horrors of life in the Soviet Union, and I would have thought he would be warning people not to go down this path that we find ourselves on. But his attitude is, I told everybody 20 years ago, and nobody listened, so be it on your heads. Well, sorry, I've got 2 children. I've got a wife, I've got a family, I've got a home, I've got a country that I care about, I have values that I care about, and all of these things are under threat. At the moment, more and more politics is creeping into my youngest son who goes to a state school. It's creeping into his curriculum. And there are some things that I've just point blank refused to teach. The lesson plans that they send home, I'm just refusing to teach it. The older son goes to an independent school, and they have a more classical curriculum, so I don't worry so much about him. But both my boys don't like the woke agenda. Instinctively, they don't like it. It runs counter to their experiences and what they know. Fortunately, the boys at their sports clubs have not insisted that they take the knee or make any political statement. The coaches have said, they're kids, for goodness sake. Just let them play football, play cricket. Or basketball. Just don't load this stuff on them. And they've been absolutely terrific. These sports clubs in our area. But I know that this ends badly. We're at a bad stage now, and people who just think, oh, it's not going to be as bad as all that, just look at the history of how bad things can get and how much we've got to lose. So I'm not going to be like the defeatists, right? I mean, Peter Hitchens, Ed West, they're interesting to listen to, sometimes interesting to read, but they're useless. You can't count on them. Daniel Bostock made a few parody songs. Now he's rolling over and dying, as far as I can tell. So I'm not going to be like that. There has to be a resistance. Maybe we have to act as a resistance in an occupied country, or maybe we're still in a situation where we can push back openly now while we can. I would say to anybody, if while we've still got a modicum of ability to push back, we should push back. Start with something immediate and local. And after that, that's why I say, come on, let's come up with some answers. Let's come up with a plan. And also, I warn people, whatever the left are doing right now, you have to imagine not just what their next step's going to be, but the next 2 or 3 steps. And I think implementing a kind of corporate social credit system to try and effectively starve people who don't have the right opinions, I think that's coming down the line. So we need to be prepared for that possibility. What would happen if that happened? Can we challenge that legally while we still can? Okay, start putting this out there. Start thinking up the answers to these things now. And we need to get some good minds, because I know that we've got so many intelligent people, but get our intelligent people to start thinking, start gaming out the possibilities of where all this will end. It's not just a few statues now, not just rewriting our history now, not just getting on our knees now. It's what comes after that. Okay, because the activists won't stop until we are in this Marxist regime, and then we have plenty of experience in history how that all ends. We start thinking now, start making decisions in our lives now, which is take a pledge, don't take a knee at work, don't make your employers make you do a political act. And look at the legal side of that. Is there a law that prevents you from being forced to take a political position by your employers? Have the defensive worked out? Also, vet your children's teaching material while they're at home on lockdown. Filter out the stuff that you think is dangerous, disingenuous. There are plenty, if there are plenty of ways to teach history. There's plenty of ways to teach English without going down a woke route. Do it, push back wherever you can. Because I refuse to roll over and die. I refuse to just drown it all in bottles of red wine. If I'm going to have a drink, I'm going to have alcohol. I'm going to do it in a nice, relaxed, happy sense. I'm not going to do it to kill the pain, to deaden the senses, to deaden yourself to the outside world. And the woods are no protection. They'll just come through the woods. Hitchens is just waiting for the knock on the door. That will happen one day if we don't push back. And so I'm casting what I call the defeatist right away. I'll still listen and read them, but I'm not putting them on a pedestal. I don't respect them. That's the thing. I respect people who are willing to fight for this. This is why do you think Churchill is admired? It's because he fought back. And that's the core of it. I think people like a fighter. We should be inspired. That's why we have these heroic figures. We have the Nelsons, the Wellingtons, the Churchills, both of the great Churchills, to draw inspiration from. This is as dark as it gets. This is the darkest time in British history since 1940. I say that without any hyperbole, because the very nature of freedom and the existence of millions of people in this country will either be forced to comply with an authoritarian regime, or we're just going to get bumped off. I absolutely think that's where these activists will take us if they're not resisted, if they're not told no. The most powerful weapon we have at the moment is the word no. And I suggest you use it wherever you can. As for bigger things, what are we going to do about the government? What are we going to do about the police? What are we going to do about our institutions? Well, we're going to have to think, break down the problem, and think of things. Because I don't have all the answers. I just say, like Jordan Peterson says, we put our houses in order, and then we just extend it to our communities, and then from the communities ever outward. But we have to get our public servants, and they serve us. And if there's enough of us raising our voices, we will bring them, drag them, kicking and screaming if need be, and remind them who they serve. And if we do this as a unified front, the unified front of no to the nonsense, the unified front of no to the Marxists, we might actually accomplish something.